Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I am going to be providing another edition of all my books. This time, this is my Timothy Zahn edition. I have been doing this series, all my books, for a while now. I have all my books, Star Trek edition, for some of the Star Wars stuff, for some of my fantasy authors and sci-fi authors like Kevin Anderson and Terry Brooks. I thought I'd do Timothy Zahn. A handful of these books will be repeats from the All My Books Star Wars edition, but I wanted to show all the Timothy Zahn books I had. So I'm going to quickly go through the Star Wars ones, and then I'll go a little bit slower with his non-Star Wars books. So first, I will address his OG Star Wars trilogy that he wrote. I have copies of paperback copy of Heir to the Empire, which I love the cover. This is a brilliant cover. This is my kind of Star Wars cover. Dark Force Rising, very good cover. Not quite as good as the first one, but a very good cover nonetheless. And then we have The Last Command, probably the weakest of the covers in my mind, but still a good cover. Then we have some of his other books, my favorites novels of his for Star Wars, which is Spectre of the Past and Vision of the Future. Like my favorite duology. This is just superb. And the covers are fantastic, particularly this cover. Oh, it's great. But both books are my favorites. It's my favorite Star Wars series. Then I have a copy of Survivor's Quest. Didn't like the book, and to be honest, the cover is only meh. The best part about the cover is you have a clear image of Mara Jade, which is actually quite rare. I also have an old tattered copy of one of the hardcovers of Heir to the Empire. I do not believe this is a first edition based off of my research, but it's a hardcover. I don't like this size of hardcover. I prefer the standard, but this is okay. I also have a hardcover of Spectre of the Past, which again, I love this cover. This cover image is just beautiful. That Drew Struzan art is just superb. Next, I have some of my more recent books of his in Star Wars. I have Scoundrels, his attempt at doing Ocean's 11 in the Star Wars universe. Pretty cool book, and has a pretty cool wraparound with some of the characters. Also have Outbound Flight, probably like of his Star Wars novels as a single novel, probably one of his best. Great, I love this cover. This is very visceral, and it has a wraparound with Thrawn on the back, or at least a Chiss, I should say. But we can assume it's supposed to be Thrawn. Then I have the hardcovers for, it's not exactly a duology, but it's kind of a duology. I have Allegiance and Choices of One. I liked Allegiance and Choices of One, but they're definitely, I think, his weakest Star Wars novels, in my opinion. The Choices of One cover doesn't stand out. Neither one of them stands out, but I hate the paperback edition of Choices of One because they give her a purple lightsaber, and I think she looks better with the red lightsaber here, even though it's got a purple tint in here. Anyway, that paperback cover ticks me off. Next, I have his first trilogy in the canon, the Thrawn trilogy. His book Thrawn. Oh, it's such a good book. Such a good book. Start to the trilogy. Like, this was like canon peaked almost. Like, it was like, man, I thought we'll never get better than this. Then we had Thrawn Alliances, and we were like, oh dear. Goodness. It's not a bad cover, except for the fact that the stickers from Barnes & Noble were terrible, and I couldn't get them off properly. Then I have Thrawn Treason, a fantastic cover. Really, really like this one. Next, we have his Ascendancy trilogy, which are all very close in cover design. I like this one because it's got the kind of, like, it looks like he's standing on the edge of something, but also it's kind of got his Star Destroyer look to it, while at the same time it could just be like a floor design. So the Chaos Rising, the first in the Ascendancy trilogy, and it's got the blue sprayed edges. Pretty cool. They didn't do sprayed edges for the rest of them, and it's, to me, I feel like they should have continued with that. They should have done sprayed edges for all of the books if they were going to do them at all, or they should have done it for none. Why they decided to do it for one and not the others is beyond me. Next, I have The Greater Good, which was a great book and a great cover. And Lesser Evil, his longest canon novel, which was pretty good, and it's a pretty good cover. So that's my collection of his Star Wars novels. I was just going really quick through those so that I could get through them, because you've already seen them in my all my books video for Star Wars. So now let's get to the non-Star Wars books of his. I'm really excited to get into these. So I'll begin with the Conquerors trilogy, a trilogy that shocked me with how good it was. Conqueror's Pride, Conqueror's Heritage, and Conqueror's Legacy. And, of course, Conqueror's Legacy has that weird back cover, which I like. The other two have the standard, writing on the back. This one, it looks like they kind of ripped off the X-Wing look, which is fine. I'm okay with that. But this one has an interior artwork that I'm like, imagine if that was the cover art. Whoo, boy, that is fantastic cover. That is fantastic artwork. And one of the things I really liked about this trilogy was how unique it was. In the first book, it's very much standard sci-fi. You're following the Kavanaugh family, doing all their stuff. Then in the second book, it's entirely from the perspective of the aliens. Entirely. And it's really hard to follow. And I was like, that's genius. And then the third book ties the two together and is from both perspectives. And I was just like, that's an ingenious way to do that. So I liked it. Next, I have the first Cobra trilogy, which I absolutely love the first book, Cobra. It's really beaten up. I hope I can find a good old copy of it, because for some reason these books were not built to last. Love the cover of the Troft in the background, and he was a soldier. He was a new kind of soldier created for a new kind of war. This book is just like classic 80s sci-fi, 70s sci-fi, like that style. I love it. Next we have Cobra Strike, which again, the cover was falling apart when I got it, so that's not all me. We tried to tape it back together a little bit, but we couldn't get all of it. Cobra Strike, the second book in the trilogy, probably the weakest book in the trilogy. Actually, not probably. It is the weakest book in the trilogy. But it was an interesting read. Then we have Cobra Bargain, which I was hesitant to get into. Again, it has that little sticker stuff. Why do you have to put stickers on your books, Barnes & Noble? Although this one wasn't actually from Barnes & Noble. It was from a used bookstore. But it was probably from Barnes & Noble originally. But nonetheless, this book, which is, you can see it's falling apart, I did not think it would be that good after reading Cobra Strike. I kind of had lost faith in the trilogy, but it was actually very entertaining, and I liked a lot of it. And I think I caught some Easter eggs that I think are quite interesting. Next, I have some 3 books of his that are standalones. 2 of them I have not read. The Backlash Mission, it's the sequel to The Black Collar, which was his first novel. And so I own this, but I won't read it until I can find a copy of The Black Collar, because it's actually surprisingly hard. I found it once at one bookstore and just didn't buy it, and I am kicking myself over that. I also have Warhorse. I read like the first 10 pages of this and then put it down because for some reason at the time it just wasn't working for me, but I intend to read it eventually because I love Timothy Zahn and I love his writing styles. Then I have the only book of Timothy Zahn's that I gave like a true negative review for, and that was Spinneret. Did not like this book. I thought that he gave promises that never paid off. He had some cool ideas that just he ran into the ground. Nothing about this book was really good, I think, in the end, when I look back on it. At the beginning, I was like, oh, this is okay. So, next I have probably the books of Zahn that I think I hold, outside of Star Wars, hold the closest place in my heart. And those are 3 standalones of his that were written between like 1998 and about 2001 that I think are some of his best books. Angel Mass, the first standalone science fiction novel I ever read, outside of like Star Wars. Like, this was the first I ever read. It was genius. And I love the world building, I love the characters, I love the sci-fi elements, I love the military elements. It didn't feel over science-y, it didn't feel over military, it didn't feel over wacky, or, it felt this, and the characters are very much Timothy Zahn style characters, so I absolutely loved this book. Honestly, a top science fiction novel for me. Then I have The Icarus Hunt, which I really enjoyed. It's probably the weakest of these 3, but it's a very entertaining book. This is the book that really sticks with a lot of other people. By the way, I didn't talk about it, the covers. Oh, that cover is just gorgeous. And this cover is pretty good too. But this book, it connected with a lot of Timothy Zahn fans in a way that just surprised me, because I never thought it connected that much with me. It was one of those, I really enjoyed this books, but not like, I need to have a sequel now, that a lot of people had for a while. And he did do a sequel, which I'll get to in a minute. But I still thought this was entertaining. the way he did a twist in this was actually quite ingenious. Then I have Manta's Gift, my all-time favorite Timothy Zahn novel, my all-time favorite sci-fi novel. I read this book just this year, and I was blown away. The cover scared me away for many years because I was like, I'm not sure I'll enjoy this book. And I read the back cover, and it just never registered with me. But when I was moving, I was like, okay, I know this bookstore has it. May as well get the book and then take it with me when I move. And then we'll see if I end up reading it one day. And I did, and I am so glad I read this book. So glad I read this book because it is ingenious. It's got the same beats that Avatar does in a lot of ways, but this is such a more bold book to do. Avatar, it's kind of like, yeah, a human gets turned into just a blue, taller humanoid with a tail. Like, it's not that big a stretch. This one, a human gets turned into a manta ray. There's a flying manta ray. And it's brilliant. So this book is my favorite Timothy Zahn book now, and I intend to reread this again next year if I have the chance, because it's just so good. Next, I have some more books from him. His trilogy, The Sybil's War, Pawn. Interesting cover. Not a favorite, but interesting. Knight. Okay. And Queen. What's interesting about this trilogy is you're able to see the ship from different angles. This is seeing the ship standing straight up. This is seeing the ship from behind and seeing it going through whatever his version of hyperspace is. And then this is the ship from the front looking at it in real space, which was an interesting idea that I applaud them for. And you can see, this is the little dome section here where the arena is. You can see here the little dome section of the arena. And on this book, you can't see it because it's like being attacked, but it's in there. And this was a trilogy that I read the first book, and I thought, man, this is very much a Timothy Zahn novel, but it's good, but it's not amazing, but it's entertaining. So I said, I'm going to read the second book. And I read the second book, and I was like, this is entertaining, but it's not amazing. Then I read the third book, and I was like, okay, this is okay. This was supposed to be a 5-book series. And Tor, who published this series, said, we don't think it'll sell well at 5 books, so we're going to cut it down to 3. So we had to squish all of the story into 3. But because of that, it feels like there's something missing. It feels like we should get more invested in these characters, and I just didn't. And so I was very disappointed in this trilogy. And as I look back on it, it's one of his weaker trilogies because it was supposed to be a 5-book series. So next I have a release from this year from him, The Icarus Plot, which was his sequel to The Icarus Hunt. I wish they had kept the same cover style as The Icarus Hunt, but I understand that this is a different publisher. He went with Bain, which I'd really like to know how all that legal stuff works. If you publish one book in a series from one publisher and another, like, how did that all work? But this book, it was entertaining. It was fine, but it didn't stand out to me. I think I was spoiled by Manta's Gift. Manta's Gift was just superb, so nothing could possibly stand up next to it. Next, I have a trilogy that I have not read yet, but I just recently purchased, and that is the Cobra War trilogy. Which that is just, look at that cover. That is how you do a sci-fi military cover. Oh, love that cover. It's a bind-up. I don't like reading from bind-ups, really, but they're cheap typically at used bookstores, which is why I end up getting them, because you're getting like 3 books for the price of 1, or in this case, 3 books for $4, which is pretty good. I loved, of course, the first Cobra trilogy, and I think that I'd be interested to see how Zahn's writing style changed from the 80s into the 2000s. So I am really excited to read this sometime. I'm thinking late 2023 is when I'll read this, maybe early 2024. But boy, do I have a lot of sci-fi books to read, so there's no guarantees. But that is my Timothy Zahn book collection. If you have read Timothy Zahn books. Which are your most prized in your collection? Have you read his non-Star Wars stuff, or have you only read his Star Wars stuff? Most people have only read his Star Wars stuff, but his non-Star Wars stuff is really great. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below, and please subscribe to the channel. I have lots of videos like this about sci-fi, fantasy, tie-in fiction, all the kinds of genres. So until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.